Now, if you clicked on this video, then you probably wanted to learn how to get better aim and improve as a player. I've seen the likes of Nico, Donk, Mondesi, even Tens for the Valorant people here, and wondered how. Now, this is not my primary form of content, but a few people have been asking me how I as a player aim and how one could replicate how some of the top players do it. Here are my top 5 tips, with number 1 and 5 being the best in my opinion, but they all overlap a little bit. Now remember, this is all from my experience, and therefore I might say something that could be wrong. And if you have some tips of your own and or questions, comment them down below and I will try to answer them with the best of my abilities. Like, sub, and let's get right into it. Tip number 1. Now this may seem obvious, but there are a lot of people that just warm up and actually try to have a routine and stay consistent with it. I have my own routine that addresses my weaknesses and one that I stay consistent with. Even on days where I'm not playing Faceit, I still take time to do my routine because I know that it will help me in the long run. So if you want to actually get good aim, make yourself a routine and stick with it until you start to see what your weaknesses are and change that accordingly. I won't go over my routine in this video, since this video is more about the tips that could help with your training session and or help see aiming in a new way. But I will link a routine from a fellow player named Zipno that addresses a lot of common starting weaknesses in players that have not used the routine before. The one thing I would change with this routine is in this tapping scenario. I'd add counter strafing between the tapping. I know the routine may seem simple, but it's effective in showing weaknesses you may have in your CS mechanics, and it promotes good mouse control over flashy flick shots. Tip number 2. Aimbot is not going to help you. Now, don't come with me immediately just yet. With this I mean the aim training, in quotes, that makes you stand in one spot and just move your mouse. Now I myself have fallen into this trap before. Even the video you're seeing is me at 14-15, thinking that I was insane for getting a sub 40 time and being just like Tens. I was not. All this does is increase your mouse control, and if that is your goal, then it's more convenient and better for you to use aim-labs or Kovacs.
Like if you only grind a specific thing, like for example the aimbots, you will only be good at that. Essentially moving your mouse like this. This is not realistic gameplay. Spray, tap, burst, you know. Make it realistic.
So even when players that are considered robotic don't like this, then how can you use aimbots to your advantage? Simulate real scenarios. You want to strafe, flick, spray control, always be moving and tracking the target before shooting to make you more subconscious to shoot only when the crosshair is on the target. Maybe some of you already know this, but I hope that this can serve as a reminder that standing still while shooting bots will not help your CS mechanics. Tip number 3. Aim at head level. Now you've heard this 1,000 times before, and I won't go too far into it, but the reason for why it is so often talked about is because it's tested and true, specifically in CS and Valorant. In other games like Apex and COD, it's a little different. In tactical shooters, you do more damage by hitting the head. Therefore, we should focus on head when aiming. Pause. And the best way to do that is visualizing where the enemy head is going to be. Now, you can play pre-fire maps that help with this, or you can play DM with a specific goal of only pre-aiming at head height, and to hold yourself accountable to do so. The best way I myself was able to get to a pretty decent level at pre-aiming was with DM one tap. Pistol DM or deagle only, with a goal in mind to pre-aim. This forces you to round the corner with your crosshair on head height to then be able to get your shot off first. If you find yourself getting a little frustrated, then good. Having a small level of adrenaline while aim training in moderation will help your improvement. I will link a video that goes more in depth in the description. Tip number 4. Staying calm and tension control. Now you've probably heard about calm aim a lot, especially if you're watching this video. And I know that when playing it gets stressful and there are a lot of variables that could interact and output your aim, so calm aim will limit how much we hinder ourselves. So how do we do this? There's a scenario I want you to run. Stand still. I know I ranted about standing still earlier, but this is related to mouse control. I first saw this drill from Konpeki. I want you to stand in the middle of the boss with only one wall down like shown. Then I want you to choose 2 bots at a time and take turns flicking between them where the initial flick has decent speed and then micro adjust. Only shoot when your crosshair is on the target. If you find yourself tensing up or almost death gripping your mouse, here's where tension controls come in. You want to lighten your grip to the point where it's almost like you're holding an egg, and then only add tension when you're coming to the end of your flick. The reason for not wanting tension constantly while aiming is for fatigue, but also the simple fact that if you start the flick with a lot of tension, then you have to use the same amount of tension to stop the flick. Rather than straining your arm through the entire movement, try only adding more pressure to your mouse once you're closing in on the target. Then implement the same in your DM and routine. The second thing is that you need to realize that you have more time to kill than you think. Take it that extra second to fully line up your crosshair and make or break the fight. A good example is when pros use deagle, as shown by Simple here. Tip 5. Now the last tip, aim with your eyes. Every single pro and good aimer uses something more than the average player. Their eyes. But I don't play with my eyes closed. That's not what I meant. What I'm talking about is the fact that when pros and really good aimers aim, they're not fixated on their crosshair. They look more at the enemy than their crosshair, as you know how far you must swipe your mouse to get your crosshair to the enemy. So why not know exactly where the enemy is and stay fixated on them rather than your crosshair? In a more detailed explanation, you have 2 forms of vision, primary and secondary. Your primary vision is what you're constantly focusing on, while secondary secondary vision is what you see more like in the corner of your primary vision. If your primary vision is your crosshair and you always stare at it, you will react slowly because the image surrounding your primary vision is being focused by your secondary vision. Therefore, your brain will process your crosshair first before the enemy model, thus reducing your reaction time. You can only react to the enemy if there's a slight change inside your primary vision. A really good example of this is if you're holding an angle. If you stare at your crosshair instead of the corner where the enemy will peek from, you can only react if the enemy is actually inside your crosshair, or at least it will be a lot harder to react until it's in your crosshair. If you change it so that your primary vision is focused on where the enemy will come from, your brain will instantly register it a lot faster and therefore make it a lot easier for you to click your mouse and hold angles accordingly. Hopefully this explained it well enough. If you have any questions, just ask, put them in the comments. I'll try to answer them the best I can. Hopefully these tips helped you, and if you like some of my other content, feel free to subscribe. Bye.
What the fuck? What the fuck is this? That is not funny. That is not, there's nothing.